So feel free to fill in the survey for the first few minutes, but hello, my name is Megan and I'll be speaking about understanding your players better through user research. Hopefully I can also provide some tips on doing this even on a very tight budget. So what is user research and why would you even bother using it? Well, can you imagine playing Mario Kart without any items? It seems like it would be a very different game. User research had a part to play in that. Can you imagine playing Halo or other competitive online shooters today without online multiplayer matchmaking? User research also played a part in that story. Not my story, but I will share it with you later on. So, like I said, if you just walked in, I have a very short survey that I'd love you to fill in to help me with my talk. I'm not collecting emails, I'm not collecting any identifying information. It'll just take you 2 minutes to help me. So I'm doing a bit of research to help me with my talk. I submitted this talk having not created it. I just put in a blurb and a title, and last week I was very much umming and ahhing about what I wanted to say about user research. I have a lot in my head and I wasn't sure what level to pitch it at, what everyone's prior experience would be with it, or even if people knew what it was. So that's what this survey is here to help me with. I thought, why not do some research to help me answer my own question? But also, I thought I'd do a bit of a meta sort of example and show you some research in action. So there's a quick survey there. Have a go at filling it in if you've just walked through. It's only 3 or 4 questions, tick box. Should only take you a few seconds. I'm going to change the slide now, so hopefully most of you have had a chance to get onto that. So a little bit about me and my background, which is a bit unusual. My name is Megan. At the moment I'm at IBM, so I'm not actually in games. The game stuff I kind of do on the side as a bit of a freelancer. But I have had a range of jobs across a few different industries. I primarily started in science communications, where I was tasked with designing engaging experiences around science topics, depending on who the client was who was asking for that or who was paying for it. The example on the right was my boss told me, hey, we got a grant for National Science Week. I pitched them this thing called molecular origami. Here's a book on origami. Go plan this event. And I had a few months to put something together. So for the event, we got permission from the origami artist to use that particular fold pattern, and we turned it into atoms. Well, we reimagined it as atoms with connectors, and we made a giant cellulose molecule, and cellulose is a molecule found in paper. And we talked to people about chemistry and we also got the local origami group involved, so we were kind of fusing art and science together. And that was the final community-built molecule. However, had we had all of the atoms folded contributed to this molecule, it would have been about twice as long, but everyone wanted to take that origami home. They were so proud of it. I've done a lot of science shows and performing across the country in schools and community halls, and essentially translating science gobbledygook into interesting stuff that anyone could understand and make it a bit more approachable. That was my role. From that, I moved into education. That was my desk at one of the schools I worked at. And back in about 2013, 14, I became interested in game-based learning. So I was using commercial video games, not educational games, which are not always designed very well, in my classroom. So I was one of the first cohort of people, I guess, using what was then called Minecraft EDU, which was a mod of the original Minecraft. Then Microsoft brought out Mojang and released their version, which is now Minecraft Education Edition, which is now very widely and freely available to most schools within Australia, which is amazing. So I was also, over the last few years, been involved with training a lot of teachers on how to play Minecraft, because they are very new. A lot of teachers are very new to gaming, but the kids are very switched on and onto it, and it's a very great engaging tool. This talk isn't about that. Happy to chat about education at another time. Some other games I've used in the classroom was, I teach physics, so I was using Portal 2 to look at energy and momentum and movement and make that content a bit more engaging for my students. And I used the STEAM for Schools program until that became defunct, which was very sad for me. Lately, I've just finished my PhD, so I was in the world of academic games research. I used puzzle games like The Witness was one of the games I used. And this game, which may be familiar to a few of you in the audience, having been made here in Melbourne, Untitled Goose Game, to look at how players problem solve and motivation and what would make a player persist through a difficult challenge versus give up. Again, I'm not going to dig into that, but if you want to talk to me about that afterwards, I'm more than happy to talk more about that. Suffice to say that the world of academic research is very different to the world of research in industry. So for the last year or so, I've been working at IBM. We don't make games at IBM, but it's a consultancy mostly doing B2B or business-to-business software and some business-to-customer for clients. So I'm called a design researcher, but I'm basically doing user research with the design team. So my role is to discover user needs, user pain points, see what's currently happening, and reimagine what we could do in the future. So I go from anywhere from the beginning of the process through to low fidelity wireframes. We then pass off to a more visual-based designer who would do the UI, the final mock-ups of the UI, and we work closely together to prototype and test those prototypes, all the way from paper prototypes through to Figma screens and user flows with our users. So very similar process to what would happen in game dev. So I'm learning a lot about how to do research at speed to be valuable for the team, which is very, very different from how you would do research in academia. So this talk is really about that. I also have to say now, these are my personal views, not those of my employer, all that jazz. So this is roughly what I thought I would talk about. We'll see how we go. I thought I'd start off with the basics so that we're all on the same page, that we have an understanding of the language that I'm using, looking at how you can do quality research or what to look for in quality research for industry research, which will be different from academia, like I said. And even if you're outsourcing your research or user testing, it's still good to have an understanding of what you're looking for from your contractors and what you should be looking for in good quality versus bad quality. Sometimes we have the best intentions, but we still make mistakes. So it's good to know what to look out for in terms of research, because it's easy to be swayed by numbers, even though that number is lying. Then how do you actually use that to inform your design and development? And then just some links and ideas for tools and resources for a range of budgets, and some cool people and communities you can follow if you want to know more. So hopefully you've had a chance to fill in the survey. I thought I'd show you the back end of the survey in case, I don't know how many of you have seen one of these before. They still haven't cancelled my license for Qualtrics, which I got through the university, so I'm going to use that. It is a paid survey tool. The difference between free and paid is that a paid tool will allow you to do a lot more than a free tool can. So what you're seeing, I guess, is a higher quality back end. So this is what the survey looks like on the front. And you'll see, usually down the bottom, you'll see like a powered by Qualtrics. I will change the projector mode so you can actually see my screen. There we go. So that's what the front end looks like. You'll see like a powered by Qualtrics. Qualtrics has a certain look to it when you use it. I fill in other people's survey just out of professional interest to see what other companies do. So I filled in one from the team recently who are making the product, the Pokemon trading game online. So they're updating the software and they're testing and they're doing a lot of surveys with the community to get feedback on features. So I went and did their survey. They're also using Qualtrics. It's a really powerful survey tool. So this is what the back end looks like. I'm going to refresh and hope that it works. So that was with 0 responses before. Hopefully I have some new responses. There we go. So you can see responses over time, if that's something you want to look for. So usually when you first, as you know, when you first release, you'll get a whole bunch and then it'll sort of taper off. If I go into the survey, most survey tools, even the free ones like Google Forms and Microsoft Forms, they'll give you a basic analysis of the answers right off the bat, so you don't even have to do anything. Oh no. Maybe not today. Let's have a look. But it will give you some basic bar charts about just summarizing your responses. So if you have questions that have strongly disagree, agree, it'll give you the nice charts without you even having to export. I have a feeling this might not work, and that's okay. I knew that might happen. So this is the editor, so you can have logic and branching and change what types of questions you have. You can have a library of questions, so you're not having to retype every time you do a survey. I will try again and hopefully. Otherwise, we'll move on and maybe I can show you later. Yeah. Otherwise, if you are on a budget, what you can do is pay for a month of premium, export your data before that month runs out, and then cancel the subscription. You do tend to lose access to your stuff when the premium dies away for some of the tools, so that's something to be aware of. I will move on, and without that then, oh well, it was worth a shot. All right, so let's talk about the basics of research. When I first started my PhD, I thought my journey might look like this: start easy, get progressively more difficult. And, you know, I knew it was going to be hard and take a long time, but I thought, you know, I'll get there eventually. But it was kind of more like this. I started data collection in February of 2020. I was doing face-to-face sessions with the kids in libraries and community centres. And then it all got cancelled within about a week in March when lockdowns happened. So I felt like my journey was like this. It was long, but I learnt a lot. So coming from a science background, I felt like I had a lot of the quantitative number skills, and this change and all my plans being interrupted really forced me to go down the qualitative route. So upside is I got to learn a lot of qualitative skills. Which is really, really handy for user research. So quantitative, or quant, is anything related to numbers or statistics. This is me summarizing at a very high level. So it's basically anything that can be measured with numbers. So in games that might be done through data telemetry, where you have like, how many users clicked on this button? How many users got this achievement? How long have users been doing this? Or how long did it take them to do this? They're all numbers, right? You can chart them, you can use them to look at trends and whatnot. Qualitative is things like words and images and videos and things that can't be measured with numbers or are really difficult to measure with numbers. People do try to measure sentiment, satisfaction, etc. with numbers. It's not perfect, but qualitative is sort of the other side of the equation. And what I see a lot of is people prefer numbers because they're hard and firm and crunchy and remind me of a hard-shell taco, bear with me on this analogy, that tell the truth. So they trust numbers. Leadership want to see numbers from research. And so this is why a lot of research will skew towards quantitative in industry. But qualitative is also still very important. And the better way to think about it is they're used for different purposes. They can't do the job of one another. They're used for different purposes. And the other thing that not a lot of people realize is that you can do both. You don't need to do one or the other. You can supplement your quantitative with qualitative to make it even more powerful. I also saw this cursed image when searching for taco images. This is a product from Taco Bell, and if I have to see it, you have to see it too. You can have both. Another example that you as an audience might appreciate is in Pokemon Chaos Legends, which is the newest Pokemon game for the next month or so at least. You do research as you catch Pokemon to fill in the first Pokedex. So you have a bunch of different tasks that you're trying to do. And if you're filling in a lot of tasks or going shallow on a lot of different areas, this is kind of like quantitative. Quantitative can tell you what is happening. So quantitative, you have large sample sizes. It can describe trends at a high level, very shallow. It can't tell you, it can only tell you what is happening. It's just describing what is happening. That is it. So a broad understanding of what is happening. However, if you were to go deep into a particular area, this is more like qualitative, which can tell you a deeper understanding on why it's happening or even how a particular thing is happening. So depending on what you want to know through your research, that should determine which techniques you're using. Not go do a survey. It should be, well, what do we need to know to progress to the next step? Or we need to know why this error is occurring. That should then inform what techniques you use to go find that answer. As an example from my life, now I made these numbers up just to highlight my case. It's not real, but let's just say you took a look, someone in Spotify decided to look at the statistics about what I've been listening to lately. You would have my most popular songs from the last week and maybe how many times I'd listened to them over the week. I'm sure that data exists somewhere. However, over the last week or two, something interesting happened. It went like this, with a new song that got listened to very much a lot of times. This data can't tell you why that happened, it's just telling you what happened. And I can tell you, or the data could probably also tell you, that that song was Catalonia by Vance Joy. Not even one of the most popular songs from the album. Well, Vance Joy's okay, but it's not my favourite artist. And so if you were to do some qualitative and actually ask me why, I would then be able to tell you, my son has decided, he heard this in the car, he's 4, he has decided this is his favourite song for the month, we've been going now, and he insists that he listens to this on repeat at night time as his lullaby. That is why the numbers look like this. But that graph, if you just looked at the stats, that's never going to be able to tell you that story. So when things look weird and you want to know why, that's when you need to dig a bit deeper with qualitative. The other songs are probably Hamilton songs, to be fair. I've been doing some courses through the Interaction Design Foundation. They are paid courses, but I get access through work, so, you know. Yes, game dev is a little bit different to regular software development, but I feel this principle in general still holds very, very true. If you can explore, using research, explore alternatives early on in the prototyping stage before you've built out a lot of stuff, it saves a lot more money than finding out these same lessons later on in the process. So it is hard to argue sometimes about why you might need research early on in the development cycle, but if you tell leadership you will save lots of money, that helps. A lot of decisions need to be made based on money, unfortunately. So actually IBM came up with a rough ratio. It's for every dollar you spend on research in early development before you've made anything, you will save $10 for making that same change in the middle of development versus then having to spend $100 on that same change after you've made or developed something. So the cost of change does increase quite dramatically once you start making things, or once you start coding up and creating and coding. So you are trying to avoid bad design decisions, essentially, through using research to help inform your design. So some of the benefits are that you can improve your UX by designing and testing with your target audience for your game or product. You know, better return on investment, like I said. So if you spend more money earlier on, your game is understandable and accessible to a larger group of people. Later on, if you can iron out some key problems, the earlier you can iron them out, the better, rather than leaving it till the last minute in QA. And you can make some more strategic decisions during your process about what you might pursue. Story from a recent client, they wanted something in real time. The back-end system was not going to support that. It could only support a 4-hourly update. And so we costed out what it would cost to bring it up to real time, and so that they decided very early on that, okay, we'll make do with the 4-hourly update. So research can help you, having research to back up can help you make those decisions. So we did some research with those end users and really drilled down to see whether it was critical that we had the real time or whether 4 hours would actually work or not. And ultimately, this is a graph that's very common. For design, you're trying to find that sweet spot between good UX or desirability for what your players want, viability, what you can actually make with the money and time that you've got, and the feasibility based on what technical tools and abilities that you have. But ultimately, what user research comes down to is having empathy for your target audience or your player. Is you should understand them very, very well and design for them and with them in mind. So a lot of the work I do, sometimes we create personas. I'm sure it's a tool that many designers have worked with before, but we try and make sure our personas are informed with user research rather than just based on our assumptions of what we think the user is motivated by. To show you an example of this, hopefully I see some of you have a piece of paper. I'd like you to do, if you have a piece of paper, draw a diamond and draw a cross. You don't need to be an artist, although some of you are. That's lovely. Otherwise, just imagine in your head what you think a diamond or a cross looks like. First thing that comes to mind, just draw it. So I've done a version of this activity. There's a bit of a longer version with many, many people, and these two particular terms come up with interesting results. So I've had, and you can compare your results to what I've got on the screen. I've had people draw a diamond like this, like the actual object of a diamond, or like this, the shape of the diamond, or, you know, depending on the audience, like this from Minecraft. A cross might look like this, or this, or this. They're all valid answers, nothing's wrong, but if you made the assumption of what a cross and a diamond look like, that might be different to what your player thinks a diamond or a cross looks like. So even really, really simple things that you think should be straightforward in your design, oh yeah, the player will know that they have to click this button or press that to do this. That assumption might turn out to be incorrect. So that's where user testing can really, really help you figure out which assumptions of yours are correct and incorrect. Because ultimately, when you're working on a game, you are not always the target audience, you are not your player. Yes, you might be designing a game that is your favorite genre and is a game you would usually play, but that is not always the case. So we're just advocating for understanding your actual target audience, not making assumptions about them. Some tips on research quality, so avoiding, or what to look for in avoiding bad research. So the Mario Kart example, there's a really great quote from one of the people involved in the development of Mario Kart 64 in an interview that they made. They said they tried to test a no-item mode to appeal to a fan base that was fans of racing games like F-Zero at the time. But as it turned out, almost everyone who tested and demoed it no one chose to play the no items mode. The items mode was way more fun. So obviously that became like a primary part of the game. Now, there's not very many games that I can play with my children because there is such a skill gap. So either I'm playing at a very low skill level and pretending, or they're struggling and not having fun. So there's not many things we can do together where we both have fun, but Mario Kart knows their audience very well. They know that families are going to play Mario Kart together. They know that players are going to have vastly different skill levels. So they have built for that. I'm not part of Nintendo. I can't speak to what user research was done there, but I know that they're doing it, as evidenced by the surveys from the Pokemon team. When you choose your cart, you can turn on support options. So you can turn on the one with the cart with the yellow antenna with the L, turns on smart driving, so you can't fall off the edge of the map. The one that shows the picture of the Switch, if you have the controller disconnected, you can turn on tilt driving, which is very intuitive for children. They just do that anyway with the controller. Oops. Or you can just use the joystick and turn off tilt control. The other one is auto accelerate. So you can turn on auto accelerate, so you don't have to hold down the A button for the whole race. So a lot of these features also improve accessibility for other range of players. The other thing they do is, in a lot of the maps, the AI kind of auto changes how difficult it is based on how you, the player, are performing, so that the most skilled player usually is in the top 4 finishing positions. So when the kids play alone, one of them will usually be in the top 4. However, if I play and race properly, they're like falling down to 8th and 10th, you know. The other thing they do is if you are coming towards the back of the race, there are 12 races in the race and 3 laps, you can get very powerful items like Bullet Bill here, which zooms you forward automatically and gives you a chance of winning. So people coming last on the last lap get some extra boost to help them catch up. So there's a lot of different features here to make the experience fun for everyone of different skill levels. So across, like I've said, you can do research across the cycle, not just at the end. There are lots of different techniques that I didn't really want to dig into any particular ones too much because I didn't want to bore you with the detail. But like I said, it should come from a place of what do I want to know, what stage of the dev cycle are you at, and then that should inform what you use, not let's go do a survey, we need to do interviews. It's what do I need to know? What research question do I need answered? What's my objective here? Another great graph I found online, so the Nielsen-Norman group has a really good website with lots of information about these different research techniques. If you want to dig into it more, they're not necessarily game specific, but software development, you know, in general. It's, another way to think about it. And in games, it is important to distinguish what customers say or what players say versus what they do, as you already know. Now, in us designing and making decisions, we are going to come across our own biases. Won't dig into it too much, but suffice to say there are quite a few different ones that are possible. So research can help us check our bias and provide some data to help us make decisions to, again, avoid assumptions and avoid our own biases. Because it's easy for us to make a design that's biased without realizing, and everyone is susceptible to, like even me, it's just not possible to be completely unbiased. So recognizing those and trying to counteract those is a good choice. There is some great examples, for example, survivorship bias. So planes coming back from World War II would have bullet holes in them. And so where do you think, if you were to add extra armour to this airplane, where do you think it should be added? In the places that have no bullet holes, because those planes aren't coming back, are they? So it can be counterintuitive, right? So the planes that get shot where there's no bullet holes, they're actually crashing, they're not coming back, so you're not seeing them. So there's things that you're not going to see, like players that quit, you're not going to see them. So why are they quitting? That's a really important question to be researching. Not just listening to the players who hang around and then complain about things. There are, like with the Pokemon trading card game, there's some very passionate players. They're complaining about a lot of things, but they're going to hang around no matter what. So what's happening to those players who are quitting and leaving? Why are they quitting and leaving? That's probably more important to address, especially value-wise, because you're losing money and value by not having those players play your game. Steve Bromley has some fantastic resources online, and he tweeted this recently and about the assumptions things. So it's important to identify your assumptions. What are the things that you have no data to back up? Frame them as a hypothesis. So in science, he suggested the way you might frame that for this is, I believe players will XYZ because, and we'll recognize it by seeing this change in their behavior in the game. And then ranking them and seeing which ones are more important, basically, to the team, and then working through them. I'm actually doing this right now with my current client in our project. We have a bunch of hypotheses. We're ranking them based on value, which one's going to have the biggest impact if we were able to test, because we have to put effort in to research to test it. So we have to rank them by value, because there's no way in the time limit that we have that we can test everything. We're not academics. We don't have 3 years to fix this problem. We have 3 months. So you have to prioritize. And money becomes, or value becomes, one of the things that you end up prioritizing based on. Some bad research examples, things to avoid. Biased questions. You can, survey design is a science or an art, however you want to call it. This is from Silicon Valley. He starts off well and gets very tired, and he starts, instead of saying not interested, interested, very interested, he starts saying interested, very interested, or very interested. Well, there's no way for them to give negative feedback there. It's all positive. This is an example from Twitter. This person received a feedback form at the end of an event. And I don't know if you can see the questions very clearly, but did you try it and what did you think? Loved it, enjoyed it, not sure, never tried. Again, no choice for negative feedback or constructive criticism there. Another story from a product that probably didn't do user testing early enough. Juicero created fresh pressed juice pouches. You had to buy a $400 machine to press the juice fresh. And the pouch had a little thing on it, and the machine would connect to the internet and tell you whether your pouch was expired or not. If it was expired, it wouldn't press it. They received a bunch of money and funding. It was going all great, Silicon Valley, you know how it is. And they tested it with some users, and the users realized they could just press the juice out of the pouch with their hands, and the expiry date was printed on the pouch, so you could just read it. So they had a very expensive machine that was completely unnecessary, essentially. And so no one was going to spend $400 to buy a machine they didn't need. So that flopped pretty heavily. So that's why testing early on before you actually build something can be very valuable. You would think that in academia, these things are not a problem. Yes, they are a problem. These are from published papers I saw in the case of my research. These people decided to exclude female respondents because their gaming experiences were too variable, and we wanted to have everyone be very similar. So let's just get rid of them. They're not important, right? They don't play difficult games, right? This paper, and I'll translate it for you, their sample had 5% females, and they said, yeah, that's roughly how many females regularly play video games, so that's okay. However, if you read the IGEA report that comes out once every 2 years, or even the Entertainment Software Association report from America, the amount of females who regularly play games is closer to 46%, which is a far cry from the 5% that they argued. So I argued back in some of my papers. I was not happy with the 5% and them saying that was okay. So it is possible to have biased population samples as well in your research. So that is something you might want to watch out for. You also do want to target your target audience. That's why family and friends can maybe not be a good audience for your research because they may not be in your target audience. For example, if you're designing a very competitive first-person shooter and your family has never played those before, then they might not be a good target audience to test on. So what can you do with all this research? Well, it is a double-edged sword. because there will always be something to fix and nothing will ever be finished. And you will find more problems to fix as you do more research. So you will also find more rabbit holes that would be interesting to follow, but you will not have the time or money to do so, unfortunately. The other thing that can tend to happen is you might find some data points, but you could interpret them this way or that way. But which way is correct? Sometimes there is no black and white answer to what you will find, and you just have to go with the best guess. So you have to sit with uncertainty, and especially in qualitative research, what I learnt is you can't quantify that uncertainty sometimes like you can with statistics. So research is not perfect. It won't provide you an absolute truth. I think that's important to recognise. This is a great report from Google I found. It's very recent. It's a really good reading. Basically, it's an insights report about gaming, and from earlier this year, they did a big online survey, and they have some really good insight, just general insights about gaming habits and behaviours. And they said, why do PC and console players pre-order an upcoming game? The second point, get exclusive in-game items. And then I saw this ad for the upcoming new Pokemon game. I like Pokemon, if you couldn't tell. Okay, we've got we've got some in-game items for a pre-order. I have a feeling these particular in-game items didn't change the pre-order numbers that much. If you were to do any research, you would know that these items are very low value and very easy to get a hold of. However, previously they have offered like a rare Pokemon or an item that you could not get in any other way, so an exclusive. That would probably work better. So you can interpret your results and still not achieve what you set out to. There's a great story from John Hobson, who is a very experienced games user researcher who worked on Halo 2 and Bungie. He did research. They asked people what they thought about competitive matchmaking. So they used to be lobbies. So you'd choose a lobby. I couldn't find an older screenshot to show, but you'd choose a lobby, you knew what game type it was, and you'd jump in, and it would just be the same players in the lobby, and you'd keep playing until you left. The design team wanted to try doing online matchmaking with other players of a similar skill level, but strangers. This was a new idea. They asked players in interviews what they thought of this. How would you feel about playing this? Oh no, that sounds horrible. I don't want to play with strangers, I want to play with friends. The researchers told the designers, they fed back the results and said, we don't think you should do online matchmaking. Keep it as the lobbies. The designers disagreed and went ahead with it anyway, and now you know where we are today. So it's really important for designers and researchers to work together, or for it to be a team effort, but it's okay to, like I said, things aren't absolute truth. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to work things out together, or go do more research, or go back and forth and try things out. It's a really great story. The feature article that he wrote is a really great story to go and read about research and how it works in industry, and how sometimes you can find the wrong answer, and then that's okay. Recently I saw this news come out the other day that I quickly wanted to mention. So Overwatch 2 has been released now. They're using, because it's free to play, they want to use some more tools to control. So you have to have a mobile phone number to sign up, and then they want to use voice-to-text tools so when you make a report about poor behaviour, they will take a transcript of what was said on voice chat, as well as having the text chat available as well, to determine whether that player gets a ban or a punishment. I have used voice-to-text tools in my research. It will be interesting to see how this goes, because no tool is perfect. Voice-to-text tools, I've even used paid tools, so good quality tools. And then you've got free tools like YouTube and Microsoft Teams and all that have the auto-transcribe feature. I don't know if you've tried them, but please do and see what the transcription looks like. It is not great. You then lose the tone of voice, so you completely lose sarcasm. It cannot tell if you're being sarcastic. It cannot deal with slang very well. Some very thick accents, it cannot deal with them very well. If you're saying acronyms about certain things, it can't deal with them. It tries to spell the letters out sometimes, unless it's a well-known acronym. Names of things and audio quality, so anytime there's background noise, it struggles as well. Sometimes I've been in an interview with another speaker who was also female, and our voices, if you listen as a human, you can tell it's two separate people, but it thought we were the same person. So that will be interesting to see how those sort of AI, because they have such large samples, they can't manually do it, but it'll be interesting to see how this goes. I think Kirk is a great person to follow on Twitter. He does research for Bungie at the moment. He's a research lead. What you want to aim for is research that's good enough and timely enough in industry. So if you can't do your research in a timely manner, if the team is just going to go off assumptions because they can't wait. Another thing, I really liked this visual. They were saying when you have data, you do have to tell a story with that data to communicate back to your team what you found. Otherwise, nothing is going to get done with that research and it's just wasted time. So how you communicate to your team, it's very important to be able to speak the team's language. So speak to developers, speak to designers, speak to artists so that they understand the importance of what you found. I'm going to skip ahead to feedback very quickly. Get a lot of feedback on games through reviews, surveys, and whatnot. It's not all valuable. So something to look for is actionable and specific feedback. Players aren't always good at giving that. So user researchers can do what's called an expert review, which can really help because at least we can speak game dev language. So some things to look for. Positive feedback, saying it's fun is very vague and you can't make any changes about that. Saying, I like the story, I wanted to know what happened next, gives you really specific feedback. With negative feedback, saying it's boring or abusing game devs, obviously not useful. You don't need to include that in your research findings. Saying I struggled in level 2 is more specific and now we know where to look to dig further to find out what's going on there. Very quickly, some tools and resources. If you have a larger team and you can afford it, in terms of UX, you can get people like myself who are UX researchers who do have specialties in that sort of research space. And otherwise, you will have your UX designer will probably do most of it. My visual design skills are not very good, so I would pass to someone else to do them. I can do them at a stretch, but I'm not going to be as fast or efficient as someone else who has a background in visual design. If you cannot pay, and many people in Australia and New Zealand are not big enough to pay for someone in-house full-time, outsource. It will save you time and they know what they're doing. And some games that have been made in Australia have used this is Playtest Cloud. You can get a quote, their specialty is games, and they can do the research for you. Another one that you might recognise, this was literally the homepage when I went to take the screenshot. I didn't even try it. This game's made in Australia, moving out, made here in Melbourne. Used Parsec. So Parsec is a tool you can use for remote playtesting and user research. I know some of the quotes, I don't know what the numbers are, but they might sound expensive, but you are going to save so much time and hassle. Like I said, investing early on will save you so much time and hassle later on. So if you don't have the expertise, don't be afraid to outsource. Steve Bromley has an amazing resource in the playtest kit. It is a bit cheaper. It'll help you do your own playtesting. Highly recommend checking that out. He works I don't know where he's working at the moment, but he does work in the industry. There are some great books you can read to help yourself upskill if you're interested. Celia Hodiant's book is more based on the psychology, neuroscience sort of side of UX, but she's got some really practical tips and tricks for good UX design. Games user research. The one in the middle is a bit more academic-y, but still very interesting and case studies from industry. And the one on the right is Steve Bromley's book, which is very practical and industry-focused. Look, I could list research tools for days. Like I said, they all do slightly different things. And they might not, a lot of these aren't specific to games. And the free version is not going to be very good, but you might like to strategically sign up for it when you need it for a month and then unsubscribe if you need to really, really budget. But the tools do save you so much time. I have hand transcribed a lot of interviews, and as soon as I got the access to Otter, which does the voice to text transcribing, it saved me so much time. It's not funny. So it is worth the money, even just in terms of your own time. Some people to follow. I highly, highly recommend, if you're interested in this space, IGEA's special interest group called GRUX, which is Games Research and User Experience. They have a really active Discord that you can request to join. The people on there, like John Hobson and Steve Bromley, like so many experienced people on there that you can talk to. They're very active, very awesome. There's also some academics on there. So there's always really interesting conversations about a wide variety of things for all career levels, so including early career. At the moment, I'm a mentor for them, so I'm mentoring someone in America. You can become a mentee. It's an amazing community to be a part of. I think we have 5 minutes for questions. Otherwise, I'm also happy to hang around outside afterwards. But thank you very much. So if we have any questions, we have 4 minutes. There's a microphone in the middle there.
Thank you. Such a great talk. And bravo for doing the research live in the middle of the talk.
The research that didn't work.
It was just
Could you just repeat whatever?
Yeah, sure.
So something I've been dealing with a lot lately in my job is kind of convincing executives about the value of qualitative research. They want those crunchy numbers. So do you have any tips about kind of convincing people of the value of surveys?
So tips for convincing people about the value of qualitative. It helps sometimes if you have an example to convince. So if you have capacity, you can sometimes do a little bit on the side and include it with the quant to really bring the quant to life and show the value of, hey, so if you have meetings with people, for example, you can record the meeting and like treat the quotes as like you did an interview and show the value of that qual through an actual example. Like, look, here's what we found. Here's a quote to highlight that. In a recent project I did where we did a lot of interviews, we highlighted how much effort we put into the interviews. We said we interviewed 24 people. We spent this many hours in interviews. We came up with these 7 major themes, and here's quotes from your employees to highlight that. And that was super, super helpful to convince the leadership about what needed to change and what the pain points were. But we did have already permission to go and do the interviews, but just turning the effort of the interviews into numbers really helped them see how much effort was behind those quotes. So those numbers, even though they're not very meaningful, it helped them understand where this was coming from, or even saying 80% of your employees that we talked to said this. I know it's not perfect, but starting to mix them together can help. But it's a very long road. Or the current project I'm on, they have a bunch of survey data, and we asked them simple questions like, well, why is this happening here? And they said, we don't know. And so we said, well, we can find out for you if you let us do some interviews. So if you have a question that's a why or a how question, you can say, well, one way we could find out is doing this, but the survey's not going to work here. Hopefully that helps.
You mentioned that one of the most important things about of ways to get information about why people are quitting the games. In your personal experience, how have you gotten that information from the people who are quitting?
So why people are quitting games, how did we get that information? Through when we were doing play testing, we would record the screen of the player. I've seen other researchers also record what is happening in the room, so what the player's actually doing at the computer. Obviously, ethically, you need to seek permission to do all this before, and they would know that they're being video recorded. And that helped us determine when they disengage. I'm sure there's also ways you can do it with data telemetry about like when they quit out of an app or when they press a certain button to quit as well, things like that.
Thank you.
No worries.
Hello. Wait, this didn't work, right?
That's okay.
So, actually, this relates to the previous one, is if you've, say, already got a demo out or already have a game out, is there, like, how would you, maybe you can tell someone's quit because they stopped playing and you don't see an activity from the user for ages. Are there any ways to, like, is it normal to contact them, like send emails and stuff and ask them?
Yeah, if you have, like if signing up as a player or you have a mailing list and they're already on it, or they've already agreed in some way to be contacted by you when they signed up for the game or service or whatever it is, you can, and you have permission to contact, you could reach out. I'm on a client at the moment where we are reaching out to people who stopped a process partway through to find out why. You will get poor response in terms of like, you always should offer an incentive like a gift card or whatnot for people giving you your time. But we're still getting poor response because obviously they've disengaged with the company, right, or the game. So why would they bother responding to you or your request? So I don't know a good answer to how could you find out, but you can reach out, and we did get a few responses and we did learn a lot from those responses, but I think you do need like a carrot to dangle in front of them to encourage them to reach out to you. And in actual fact, if I think about an experience recently with HelloFresh where I just continued my thing, they reached out just to like get me to re-engage, but they never asked me why I stopped. And so they're like, oh, we can give you this new discount code to get this. And I was like, yeah, but that doesn't fix the problems I had with you. And you're not even asking me what those problems were. So some people who had problems might be really happy to tell you what those problems were because they want to see them fixed and see the game get better if they're really attached to the game and want to keep playing. So it's definitely, if you have permissions and you have their contact information, it's definitely not unusual to reach out to them. But yeah, you might need to give them a gift card or something to encourage them to engage.
I also have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Which was about playtesting, right? So, are there any like methods that are acceptable to like capture data where it's not that isn't like easily just like written down or on like a survey? Like it might be too fast to like record them. I don't know.
Yeah, so you should always have permission first, and you should always clearly describe what data you're capturing. So if it's a video recording or if it's voice recording, they should know what is being recorded. So a lot of the AAA studios will have an in-house computer lab with all that set up, and you sign an NDA and an ethics form saying, yep, I agree to all this being collected. But it's not unusual to video record. The problem becomes with qual. The more you collect, the longer it's going to take to analyze. So let's say I have an hour of interview. You should assume it's going to take you twice that time to analyze it properly. So it becomes unwieldy. With 5 to 10 is a really good sweet spot for investigating a question, 5 to 10 people. But it becomes very unwieldy if you get more than that because you're never going to action that data. It's just all those videos are just going to sit there and no one's going to watch them. But they are super, super valuable because they're so rich and contextual, and you'll keep going back to them and finding new things as you have more questions. So yeah, it's definitely doable. Remotely, it's going to be a bit trickier, but screen recording is very easy remotely. But I guess recording the person and what's happening in their context and environment is very, very tricky remotely. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that answers everything.
Thanks.
Any further talk, Megan? Do you have any advice on efficacy testing in serious or transformational games, which is more in the realm of academia and bigger companies?
Yes, so that is an extremely difficult challenge, regardless of. Efficacy testing for serious or transformational games. How can you do it? It's a really difficult problem. There is no one simple, straightforward answer. It would depend on. So my background was doing that in education, And to prove that they learnt something is really, really difficult because there's no standardized tool that everyone uses all around the world that can prove they learnt this science concept. You could make up a science test, but does that really prove that they learnt that? Well, it's kind of an indicator, but it's not an absolute truth. So in psychology, there's a lot of validated surveys and tools and scales that you can use for things. But for other changes, like there's a lot of work in training surgeons with VR and whatnot. How can you tell they've improved their skill? I guess you could measure behavior before and after. What I wanted to measure was, I was looking for like a puzzle-based task that tested persistence, and there's very, very few, and they're not that great. But I was like, well, if we can have a pre and post measure and that changes, that might show something. But then what if it doesn't change? Does that mean my tool is completely ineffective? Not necessarily. So it's really, really hard. It would be really specific to the field or the skill that you're looking to train. And sometimes the changes are also long-term, but the studies are short-term, so they don't capture that longer-term change as well. It might be like 6 or 12-week intervention pre-post. So it's really, really hard to do. But I wish you luck with that challenge.
Thank you so much for the talk.
Thank you.